Our topic for the panelists is to help us build a new age pharma company out of India. Uh, and I couldn't have asked for a better set of thought leaders to delve upon the various aspects of what it takes to build a pharma company in 40 minutes than the panelists we have today. We have Alex Voronkov, who's the CEO of Insilico Medicine, Siddharth Shah from API Holdings, Manish Gupta from Indegene, and Aman Desai from Aether Industries. Thank you all for joining us. So the way we'll approach the problem is we will build this company step by step. And so I will give each of you a building block that needs to be created. And we will start with Alex. So Alex, your role is to help us build the research part of the business. Insilico Medicine, just to provide an introduction, is a global leader in next-gen AI-driven technologies for drug discovery, for biomarker development, and also for aging research. Alex is based in Hong Kong. And Alex, I know that we can go on this topic and talk about it for a day. But if we have 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes, tell us about how some of these AI technologies can be used to make drug discovery better, faster, potentially cheaper.
Thank you, Prem, for this generous introduction. And I must say I'm deeply privileged and honored to be speaking with you today. And before I start, I must thank the organizers and also Roads for making us happen, because without Roads, there is a chance that there wouldn't be Insilico. So all the startups note, once you get Roads on board, the future becomes brighter. So that's a very good start for drug discovery. So without further ado, I'll get some visual aid, because one slide sometimes is worth more than 1,000 words. And in under 10 minutes or less, I'll talk a little bit about the early stage drug discovery and innovation that is driving the pharmaceutical industry, and that is necessary to make blockbuster drugs, and also where AI can help. Of course, all illegal disclaimers, no forward-looking statements, not an investment advice. This is probably the most important slide that everybody has to take away from this talk, because actually, after many years in the pharmaceutical industry, many pharmaceutical industry executives do not even grasp every step of drug discovery and development, which starts from disease hypothesis and target discovery. So that's where you formulate your basic understanding of the mechanism of disease and try to narrow it down. Success, number of years it usually takes, and the amount of money in millions of dollars that it may cost at every step. This slide comes from a very famous paper by Stephen Paul, How to Improve R&D Productivity in Nature Reviews Drug Discovery. And it shows you that basically from target hypothesis to launch, it may take you 10 to 12 years to get the drug to the market. And most of the time it will fail. So at the target discovery stage, the probability of success is 1 to 5%. So if you were to play in a casino, you would not come to this casino, right? That's why, for example, countries like India are superpowers when it comes to generics, but risking very substantial amounts of money with this kind of probabilities of success is not exactly easy for private capital. And you see countries like China that recently joined the biotech innovation marketplace. There, the government incentivizes and regulates the big pharma companies internally to put more money into early stage R&D and specifically into target discovery and novel molecules. So you can see that once you've identified the target, the probability of success in identification of good molecules is actually pretty high. It will take time, it will cost money, but it's a mechanical process. And after that, it's clinical trials. Again, most of the clinical trials fail in phase 2. So the probability of success there is under 60%. Actually under 35%. So 65% probability of failure. And the main reason for that is because your target choice is wrong. So when we entered into AI-powered drug discovery as in silico, we first tried to map out all the steps of the pharmaceutical R&D. So you can just see that there are many steps that have to be accelerated and can be accelerated by AI. We looked at the general timelines that a traditional biotech in the best case can achieve, and tried to map out what we can do with AI to go end to end in early stage drug discovery. So automate the multiple steps in transcriptomic proteomic data analysis, disease causality research, literature research. Those are different types of AI that have to work together in order to produce the best disease hypothesis and narrow it down to an individual target. Then we also decided to go after chemistry. So you've all heard about AlphaFold, right? AlphaFold provides you with the ability to predict protein structures really accurately. And it's very often touted as the breakthrough in artificial intelligence for drug discovery. But I just wanted to show that it's a very small piece of the puzzle. Unless you have many other pieces, you would not have the molecules on the market. So we've also mapped out the chemistry part and decided to develop a system that allows the pharmaceutical industry and biotechnology industry to identify targets very effectively using multiple disease hypothesis generation platforms. So it's many AI models. Then also chemistry. Chemistry 42 allows you to design molecules with the desired properties. And also we are trying to crack the grand challenge, prediction of clinical trials, phase 2 to phase 3 transitions, using preclinical data. That project is still in progress, but it's a 6.5-year effort where we're doing a lot of prospective validation. So at InSilico, we decided to transform ourselves into AI-powered biotech. So we started as an AI-only company. So doing AI services for the others and also generating the capabilities and building software. But then we quickly realized that we actually had to bet on our own therapeutic programs in order to realize the value for the shareholders, but also to improve and validate the AI platform. I think that's the major source of competitive advantage nowadays. If you don't have validated AI platform with your own therapeutics, people just won't work with you because they will have to bet the same amount of money on their own programs. So what we demonstrated with the AI that you can now take a novel target, generate a novel molecule with AI for a very broad disease with no cure. And we've managed to set a few records to my knowledge. So we've demonstrated that under 18 months with AI and with the power of many contract research organizations, you can go from zero, from a novel target to a preclinical candidate in under 18 months. So we announced our first preclinical candidate in February 2021. And then we demonstrated that we can identify a novel target using AI, synthesize the molecule using AI, perform all the preclinical experiments. Since the target is novel, we also did a small phase 0 study in Australia, just to ensure that it's reasonably safe and we understand a little bit more, get a little bit more information about the compound, its distribution, and the target. And then started the phase 1 clinical study. We did it under 30 months. And since then, we turned this AI platform into a factory of preclinical candidates. So since February 2021, we nominated 8 preclinical candidates. To my knowledge, it's a record. And now we are opening this to the others to do the same thing, because in this case, it becomes a roulette where you put coins in, so cash in, and you get preclinical candidates with the desired disease in mind. Now you can improve the probability of success with AI and definitely de-risk and cost down the programs. And I think for India, that would be a perfect platform to use. And of course, the local companies should follow suit because it has a very well-developed CRO network. Just like in China, you've got massive contract research organizations, billions of dollars invested in CROs. And now AI companies can work on top of those CRO companies to act as an operating system and enable early stage drug discovery with lower risk. Again, the main benefit of AI-powered drug discovery is that you're minimizing the risk. It does not exactly result in huge benefits in time because you still need to perform the experiments if you are performing if you're really trying to race to the clinic. The regulators will require the experimentation, but it will help you de-risk the programs. So thank you very much. Here is my contact information. Would love to answer any questions and participate in further discussion.
Thank you, Alex. And I'll come back to you. But really fascinating. And as you were speaking about it, the thought that stood out for me was Indian companies have done a reasonably good job, in fact a very good job of laying a bedrock around generics and generic drug capabilities. And do technologies like this allow them to leapfrog into becoming significant and meaningful innovators? But I'll come back to probe on that theme in a little bit. But let me move now. So we've got a new age drug discovery engine. So we've got the drug. Now we need to set up a manufacturing facility for that drug. And for that, I would love to call upon Aman. Aman knows that, I've been a big fan of his family and Ather since I met them in Surat several years ago. And their blockbuster IPO was no surprise to me. Ather is a prime example of how you can build a cutting-edge manufacturing platform from scratch, one that competes, of course, top of line on quality and also top of line on price. And so one of very few Indian companies that is able to compete head on with their Chinese peers and win in many cases. So Aman, if you have to set up a facility of the future, what does a plant of the future look like, and what are some of the design principles that you would use?
Prem, thank you. Thank you for having me on this panel. It's quite a privilege and a pleasure. And thank you for the very gracious introduction. Building the pharmaceutical industry of the future, that's a fascinating question. We've built our company and our first plants only 5-6 years ago. And if I had to do it all over again, it would be much more fun. So in terms of the future, I think the traditional chemical industry processing needs to be seriously looked at. I would comment on just a few points in this introductory part, and then we'll discuss more, I'm sure, as this discussion goes on. But focusing on process intensification and continuous reaction technology and continuous flow technology. And over the last decade or so, this has become a buzzword, but really there are only very few examples of companies that have successfully demonstrated this at production scale, especially in specialty chemical industry. This is the norm in commodity industry and petrochemicals, but in specialty chemical industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, this is very rarely done and been successfully validated by a very handful of companies. Over the last decade or so, the FDA regulations, US FDA regulations and EPA regulations have permitted continuous flow technology as a permissible means of production of APIs and advanced intermediates. And so there's no roadblock to it. But I suppose continuous reaction technology has to start as a mental thing right from the start of the R&D. And so once you are discovered the drug and go into the pilot plant, from day one, the continuous reaction technology and flow technology and process intensification has to be a mindset and a philosophy that the manufacturing is designed according to. So piloting it to death in terms of continuous flow technology, and not just the reaction itself, but the downstream as well. And so the extraction, the separation, the purification, the formulation, everything should be thought of in a continuous manner, in a process intensified manner, which will A, decrease your footprint, B, decrease potentially your OPEX, CAPEX, makes your processes much cleaner, makes them much higher yielding, and makes you, at the end of the day, cost competitive as compared to on a global level. And so continuous flow technology is something that and process intensification. And I think process intensification is a much better nomenclature than continuous flow technology, because you're intensifying the process, and not just the reaction, but the entire processing unit operation, the entire suite of unit operations that go into production. Then I would go on to automation. Again, automation is something that is lightly used. I would recommend automation from the pilot plant itself, where you are initially piloting your production batches and scaling them up and setting up the interlocks of process and safety and utility in the automation at the pilot plant scale, and then translate into production. And these automation has to synchronize the entire production facility. So everything from the production to the utility to the tank farm to the safety systems have to go automated as much as possible. Of course, somebody that says in the pharmaceutical industry or the spec chem industry that my entire production train is completely automated doesn't know what it's talking about. And so you have to be careful with that. But as much as possible, one should go with DCS automation, hot redundant DCS platforms, which are redundant supplies, redundant power controllers, and redundant lines, which provide a very high degree of reliability, reproducibility, and most importantly for us, it's inherent safety. And so, which brings me to my next point of what would the pharmaceutical industry of the future look like. I think one would be remiss if one does not mention safety. Process safety has to be at the topmost focus of all organizations, all chemical industries, and process intensification, continuous flow technology, automation, all bring about inherent safety. And so that's something that I would talk about as well. And the last point, I think, which we could discuss later is sustainable production and green production. I don't like the word green because it's again a buzzword, but sustainable production practices is something that I would also talk about when I think about, building a pharmaceutical industry in the future. So let me stop here and then happy to discuss. Again, thank you.
No, perfect, Aman. I think it's super to see a combination of, as I said, price, quality, and sustainability all being rolled out as a package. And as the CEO of one of our early partner companies called Loris Labs told me a long time ago, he said, look, don't ask me to compromise on quality. You name your price and I will get to that price through innovation, but I will maintain one quality standard for the world. So I think that is definitely where the pharma industry is heading. Okay, so we've got the drug. Aman has helped us, set up a new age plant that has process intensification, level of automation, a level of safety and sustainability, and I'll come back to that. So we've got two of those elements. Now we've got to take the drug through clinical trials, and we've got to then market the drug. And no one better to speak about that than Manish Gupta. Manish is the CEO of Indegene. And over the years, Manish and his team have built the de facto strategic digital transformation partner for large pharmacos, including Pfizer and many others. So Manish, you have two jobs in this building. One block is around clinical trials, and then I'll separately talk about marketing. When it comes to the D part of R&D or the development side, what's new age when you're thinking about and you're seeing clinical trials? How is technology disrupting age-old practices of driving trials?
So first of all, thank you so much, Prem, for inviting me to this event. Always a pleasure to be talking to you especially. Thank you for that. So before I even get into this thing, it's interesting. I was just listening to all this stuff, I still remember it was probably 2008-9, and we were all obviously in this whole space, trying to answer the question which you just asked, right? How should a pharma company of the future look like, especially on the commercial, medical affairs, and all those kind of things. And that's a time when India had become very hot on clinical trials, if you guys remember, right? And we decided not to do clinical trials because we thought everything is too operational in this. And later on, 10 years later, we revisited that whole proposition and got back into clinical trials. And why? Over the last decade, there has been so much data which has got generated, at least in Western markets, right? EHR, genomics data, claims data, and it can go on and on. I'm sure you guys are tracking all that stuff. So first of all, as Alex had pointed out, right, the probability of success in every phase of the trial is low. So if you are setting up a pharma company of the future, right, and we work a lot with biotechs also now with what they think to help them think through some of these things. How do you bring all these data sources to think about your trial protocols, your design, your feasibility, right, site identification, with a with a higher, to finally increase the stakes, right, or increase the odds of you winning, right? And all these data sources enable that today, right? So that's I would say, the starting point, and we are seeing more and more companies do that. Now, a bit of a utopian thing, and especially for big pharma, when you're setting up all these data sources, can you also think about breaking silos, right? What you're doing in commercial, or what you're doing on the R&D side of things, will also be used in commercial. But right now, at least the way big pharma is structured, there are silos, right? And this doesn't flow through. But if for a new biotech, right at the beginning, designing systems, processes in your organizations in a way that you can, whatever you're developing on the D side, right, could be used more across the value chain, is a very useful thing to do. Now, beyond what I just said on the real world data and designing protocols, in many cases you can skip, right? Skip some of the or shorten the time of your trials if you have the right data sets and the kind of molecule you're developing. Obviously, everyone will have different, depending on if it's a 505(b)(2), it might be different, right? Versus the completely new molecule. So those are the things which kind of get started. The other big change we have seen over the last 15, 20 years in this whole trial processes, and the big 20 years back, everybody wanted to get as much real estate as possible, right? When you're filing your patent, or when you're doing your trials, you want to get all claims under your belt, right? Which means that there's a pretty broad stake which you are putting in the ground, which also increases risk, right? Because when you have a big label which covers many things, you might end up having issues in the drug. And drug discovery is one area where we keep joking that it's like you have a beautiful product. Every stage when you are modifying it, making it better, it starts looking ugly, right? Through the trial process. And if you're trying to solve too many problems by having a broader label, obviously that probability increases. Now, what we see is some of the smarter companies are saying, you know what, we will get into the market very quickly with a very focused label, right, which can be enabled by using the right data sources and stuff like that, right? Being smarter about that, get into the market, and then you expand your label over time, right? And again, given that it just becomes so much easier to do that, right? Obviously, there's a risk of somebody else coming in and all that stuff, but that's one thing which we are seeing on the trials side. Now, beyond that, there are many more things. How do you, and some over the last couple of years, we've helped companies expedite trials by recruiting patients from digital sources, right? Accelerating that, screening of patients through various digital means. So essentially increasing the cycle time of closing these drugs, which became very important because of the backlog which got created during COVID, right? And every company jumped into that to figure out how to catch up on the time they might have lost. But more and more, it's become a much more prevalent thing now. So that's on the D side of things, right? But that's when the D side is happening. That's when the medical affairs teams, right, are also, and the commercial teams, strategic marketing teams are getting over that. How do I be ready to make sure that I've done everything? As soon as the approval comes, the curve for peak sales starts kicking in, right? That's where at least what we see is the medical teams are becoming much more strategic, right? They're just not the gatekeepers or the people who are saying what you can do, what you cannot do, right? And they're playing a much more active role in terms of shaping the narrative of what the drug is going to be, how the drug is going to be taking into the market. So designing the medical affairs team, which are much more strategic, I would say commercially inclined, while obviously having the balance of doing the right thing, right? So that's one big trend we are seeing across the board. And there, the medical teams, of course, are again leveraging on the data side of things, real world data, but health economics, outcome research, market access, pricing, those things are becoming much more, significant, and using data sources, right? Because if you might have all the right drug, but if you haven't, if you don't get it on the formularies, right, the insurance companies don't approve it, it's no point, you lose it, right? There's no point. It's as important as clinical trials. So using the right data sources, analysis to then get your drug, right, on the formularies, get the right pricing in a much more scientific way, those things have increased over time. And it's very important to factor that in earlier. Your scientific messaging, right, across the board. Now, the way, and I'll come to the commercial side, but more and more medical affairs teams are also asking the question that how do I use digital, right, to get the message out, have those conversations with physicians, which are allowed, right, by law, by regulation rather, right, in a much more digital enabled way, right. So virtual MSLs, right, virtual conferences, bunch of those kind of things are being done. A digital medical affairs organization. Now, after all this stuff, very good.
Sorry, keep going, Manish.
Yeah. So after that thing is done, then essentially comes the launch, right, and then managing the cycle of product, and that's where we as Indigen at least have done a lot of work. Now, by the way, we run this thing called Biotech CEO Forum in the United States, right, where we have, and we do similar thing on the big pharma side, right, where 5 years back, we got people, biotech CEOs, big pharma commercial teams, big pharma medical affairs team, and pose the same question, what you've said, that how should your organizations in the future look like, right, 5 years down the line? If you're going to launch a product or manage a mature product, then what's going to be the way? And we've been trying to answer that question and evolving the question along with them. Here are some of the things which we figured out in this piece and have implemented programs. I'll give you an example of a product which we worked with a biotech company very recently. Right? This company had 800 reps. They were doing some bit of digital, covering the market, but they were under pressure from all sources. Right, this listed biotech, and they were struggling. And when we were called in, we met the team, saw the coverage they had. And our AR team could actually identify we believe that they're wasting money, right, over here. And our proposal, after looking at their coverage and everything they're doing, is that what you could do is cut down on the reps, bring down 800 reps to 300, right? That frees up a significant amount of money. If I'm not wrong, it was $40 million or so, right, on this stuff. They redeploy some percentage of that, right, to cover physicians through a digital channel, right? And we figured out, what the reps could cover high prescribers, right, but people who have low digital affinity physicians, whereas there are a bunch of physicians who have a very high digital affinity can be covered through a digital route, right? And you can imagine this is a significant saving for this company. And there was a prescription uplift of almost 15%, right, after you did this stuff, while saving money. Now, this is essentially on the launch side or early stage, right? It's a growth molecule, right? Now that's one piece. We also have been working with larger pharma companies who might have products in a last stage, right? If loss of exclusivity is very close, and they have a bunch of products over there. At this point of time, what you want to do is squeeze the product out as much as possible. Don't spend on that. Use those budgets for your new launches. And there again, we deployed similar strategies where you could bump up the sales a bit, right? And obviously reduce the cost a lot. And that freed up resources very significantly. One is the cost and effectiveness part, but I guess where the world is moving in a broader healthcare thing, regulation, I don't think there's an option, right? Because in the United States, at least, a lot of doctors are even not meeting reps. I think that, if I'm not wrong, the number is close to 40% now, right? No reps would be allowed in those places. So that number has gradually gone up over these years. So, the use of digital, right, and analytics, as you see in sales and marketing, is a big theme which we've been working on with companies. The other thing, and it's interesting, I know you are an ex-McKinsey person, right? We used to use this chart in 2008-9, where you would show that, 80% of budgets in pharma commercialization are for physicians, right? And X amount for patients, very small amount of patients, and that led us to build patient capabilities. The reality is that the shift was very slow. But today, what we see, especially for specialty products, right, oncology or any rare disease and all the stuff, it's a complex therapies, right? And more, what we are seeing is that dollars being allocated much more for things like patient hub, adherence, onboarding of patients, right, making sure that you don't lose your patients. And that initially was, at least 5-10 years back, was a very manual process. But again, the digital is being brought in a very significant way in those areas. But if I just step back, right, on this whole piece, more allocation of budgets to medical affairs, right, medical affairs, definitely being much more strategic about market access and pricing, right, just not thinking about hitting the physician, right, that's the other theme. Allocating dollars to patient access, especially if you have a specialty product, right? And designing the right mix of digital and reps, and having a layer of data analytics and digital across the board, right? That's how at least we see the pharma industry of the future moving.
Super helpful, Manish. And I think you touched upon a variety of points. I think the one other trend, and I think it's covered in the broader messages on trials, is also just the use of technology when it comes to investigator selection, site selection. How do you make sure your productivity goes up? Because every few months you can accelerate the trial is a few more $100 million of revenue, right? So opportunity cost is directly revenue. But no, thank you for taking all of those thoughts. So we've got the drug, we've got the plant, we know how to take it through trials, we know how to market it. Now the big problem is you've got to get the drug from the factory to the pharmacies and the distributors, and then now also to the end consumers. And I'd love to pick Siddharth's brains on it. Siddharth is the CEO of API Holdings. I think most people continue to recognize API as the holding company for the largest online pharmacy in India called Pharmeasy. But API is a lot more than that. It is a digital supply chain disruptor and a far bigger play across the supply chain. And in Siddharth's case, it's been really awesome to see him build this from a business plan to the company it is now, since I met him way back in 2014. So Sid, thank you for taking time. But the question for you is, what role are you seeing tech play, or how is the supply chain getting disrupted when you think about the flow of drugs?
So, Prem, a big thanks to you and the entire ATOS team for inviting me. Like you said, I've had the opportunity of rather knowing you since 2014, when it was a small business plan, working from a small warehouse in Mumbai to now being the largest digital player in healthcare in India. I think what I might say might seem very biased or cliched, but we are firm believers that digital is the future to go, at least as far as the entire supply chain, or I would even go further and say the entire outpatient healthcare ecosystem is concerned. Speaking specifically of the supply chain, I think we all know, especially in India, there are certain very critical things which seem very normal for us in India, but is very different from what you see globally. As an example, we all deal with medicines which are branded generics, right? So doctors over here will not prescribe paracetamol, but they will write the name of crocin as an example. So for a couple of thousand molecules, you have maybe a couple of 100,000 brands in the market. What this means is, if you couple that with the supply chain that we have in the country, that is the fact that we have 60,000 distributors, but more importantly, we now have 800,000 retail pharmacies. It's impossible for any pharmacy to stock all of these products, right? I mean, your simple laws of physics will dictate that in a 3 to 500 square foot pharmacy, you will only have about 5,000 products. So combination of 1 and 2 is that availability is a challenge. You will very rarely come across a scenario where all the brands which your doctor has prescribed is what you will get in your pharmacy. I think data point number 2, given the fragmentation of the supply chain and the scale of the country, it becomes very difficult to get medicines with their full potency by the time consumers have it, right? It's estimated that 1 in 5 medicines loses their potency, either is due to bad manufacturing or bad distribution practices. And data point number 3, if you look at what has happened globally in the world, let's say in a parallel industry like financial services, the world moved from transacting in barter to transacting in cash. From cash, they moved to check. From check, they moved to cards. And from cards, we moved to digital. But if you look at what has happened in India, especially with UPI, we moved directly from cash to digital. And one of the unique things about that is the fact that digital adoption today in the country is at an all-time high. And what we need as a solution, in my view, is not something that is going to invest billions and trillions of dollars to just upgrade or invest in physical healthcare. While that is necessary, I do believe that the last mile connectivity can be brought in, especially in outpatient care, where we don't have to invest trillions of dollars and inflate the cost of healthcare like it is in the West. But affordable, accessible healthcare can be built by creating a digital solution that sits on top of a physical solution. What I mean by that is, how can you use these 800,000 pharmacies as, let's say, last mile transshipment hub to get the necessary medicines with, let's say, 100% full rate, 100% authenticity to the consumers, is where I would say the beauty of solution lies in a place like India, right? And what is true for, let's say, delivery of medicines, I think is true for the delivery of diagnostics as well. You may not have to create laboratories in every part of the country. If you can create a digital solution to map out the phlebotomist, map out people who pick up these samples, get them to the lab in a given turnaround time and have them delivered. And at least our strong belief at API Holdings has been to create this digital solution that works beautifully with the existing physical solution. As a company, Prem, as you're aware, we deal with 180,000 out of 800,000 pharmacies in India. So roughly 1 out of 5 pharmacies in India is part of our network. We use that to deliver medicines to a couple of million patients every single month in every habitable zip code of India. Our diagnostic services under ThyroCare and Pharmacy now process more samples than anybody else in the country. And that's purely because of the fact that we only have 19 labs, but we now have a network of over 4,000 plus last mile franchisee partners that are spread across 280 districts of the country. So our strong belief is that if you want to focus on affordability, you want to focus on availability, you want to focus on authenticity and quality, the solution is to overlay digital on top of the existing physical. That will provide the last mile access in the best possible manner. And dare I say, not just in medicines, but across the entire spectrum of outpatient healthcare.
Very helpful, Sid. And I guess the other trend that we are seeing is the broader consumerization of healthcare. what role are you seeing, or what role do you expect to see pharma companies play when it comes to getting closer to the consumer?
Look, I think especially in India, a lot of pharma companies, I would believe, are more doctor centric rather than consumer centric, because the way in which they have typically grown is by having a field force that goes and educates doctors about their products. In more cases than not, these products are me too generics, and the role of the sales force and the pharma company is essentially to promote their product to the doctors, such that the doctor would then prescribe this brand and the consumer would take this brand. Now, what that does is it significantly increases the cost of medicines to the end consumer, especially in the case of a branded generic product, which is pretty much like 85 to 90% of our market. Now, if you flip the model and put the consumer at the heart of the solution, where you say that if consumers are educated enough around the fact that a paracetamol is a paracetamol, whether it is taken in brand A or brand B or brand C, right? And thereby create a solution where drugs are made more affordable as part of what you could call as a continuous care plan or a benefits management program or something like that, or a subscription plan. I think significantly increased consumerization is likely to happen. And in this role, the role of the doctor is not being bypassed, but the role of the doctor, much like it is across the world, is to decide a course of treatment on the molecules or the nature of treatment, but not necessarily influence the brand. And if you keep this, I think your ability to offer healthcare in a much more affordable manner will come into play, number one. And number two, one of the big missing things in India, which is outpatient insurance, will also come into play. Today, because of the fact that, I mean, it's actually a surprise that we don't have outpatient insurance in India. I mean, it's surprising that if there are two patients and patient A and B are both diagnosed with high levels of cholesterol, let's say in their early 40s, and the doctor has described that they should take statins, get their cholesterol checked every few months, go visit a doctor. Patient A does all of that and patient B does none of that. And patient B unfortunately ends up with a heart attack and has to undertake an open heart bypass surgery. The insurers will pay a couple of lakhs for claims when you undertake a bypass surgery. But the same insurer unfortunately will not pay you a single penny in order to keep yourself healthy, which means your health insurance is only going to pay you in case you really screw up your health and not support you as you continue to maintain your health. And I think this model also can be turned the moment you create a more consumer-centric ecosystem, right? And I think a combination of change in the way you put consumers at the heart of the solution, while still ensuring that the best of medical protocol is followed, and then create this layer of outpatient health insurance and care, I think is a very potent tool that will perhaps come to India very soon.
Got it. No, very helpful, all of you. So I think the interesting thing is, as you think about, revamping the research part, development, you have clinical trials, you have manufacturing, you have supply chain and marketing. There is a broad role of technology in just sort of being digital that seems to be applicable across all of the layers. And then, of course, segment-specific technology, which is either on the research side or on the manufacturing side, that is available, just given what is cutting edge and best in class today. The other aspect that struck me as all of you were speaking was that it will be really hard for the incumbents to revamp, because a lot of what you're talking about requires transformational change and fundamental change. And therefore, it is almost either easier for a de novo company to do it, or for the incumbents, whether it's the Pfizers of the world, and Novartis has made a lot of announcements around going digital. But in general, I think it's been harder than people anticipated. but easier to buy, I assume, than build. But moving on, I guess, to part two of the questions, and putting on your futuristic hat, even though this was quite futuristic in itself, what are a couple of trends, one, two trends that you think will be disruptive for life sciences and healthcare over the next decade? And maybe we'll go in the same order that we did previously. So start with you, Alex, if that's okay.
Sure, always happy. So, of course, AI trend is going to continue. I think that smaller players like us and others that do have the capabilities going end to end will also start developing their own pipelines. You just mentioned Novartis. By the way, right now I'm dialing in from Basel. So I spent a week in Basel, and this week was pretty disruptive to the pharmaceutical industry because Novartis announced very substantial layoffs. Their CSO just left, and they pretty much cut down, I think, 80% of their IT R&D. So all that talk over the past few years did not result in substantial value, as you just mentioned, and they just decided to cut it. So I think that this trend is also going to continue, and it provides a substantial opportunity for smaller players to come in. Also, another trend in technology is AI plus robotics. So AI robotic labs in discovery. We're building one. There are many other companies building one. So once you understand that there is incremental value of the data that you can generate yourself consistently with high quality, and you know the value of this data for discovery, you can automate. And now it's the age of automation, so you can even have AI guided discovery. So we are focusing on that. And also in AI, the general trend are transformer neural networks, and specifically multimodal transformers. You've seen all those wonderful, beautiful drawings that are being created recently by Midjourney and DALL-E. This technology can be scaled up and also put into multi-purpose, multi-domain applications. So technologies like Google DeepMind's Gato that can perform multiple tasks at superhuman capabilities, superhuman performance. I think that we are going to see that in healthcare and in drug discovery as well. We are working on one as well.
Thank you, Alex. Aman?
Yeah, interesting question, Prem. I think one of the major trends coming into already over the last few years, and which will get emphasized over the next decade or so, will be the drive to green or sustainable operations and processes and production, and shifting from crude oil to renewable resources and renewable energy. Especially, this has been a buzzword for decades now, but if you think about it, the majority of chemical industry today is based on crude oil and traditional feedstock chemistry. But now, as you see, increasingly getting enhanced over the last few years, and especially this year, are these tremendous effects of climate change, number one. Number two, these issues of wars happening between Russia and Europe, and leading to the tremendous and abrupt scarcity of energy and gas in Europe. I think you will see over the next few years getting accelerated is this drive towards sustainable processes, sustainable production, sustainable manufacturing, and I think people have to be ready for it in advance. The way to get ready for it is to actually transform your operations and processes inherently to become more sustainable in terms of atom economy, in terms of continuous reaction technology and process intensification, as I mentioned before. And really, in terms of production, sustainable and green production is inherently good chemical engineering to begin with, and then adding on these new age technologies and automation and continuous technology and process intensification. And so I think increasingly in the next decade or so, I think you'll see this tremendous drive coming in. And we already see this happening tremendously in Europe immediately right now. And the rest of the world is going to follow suit rapidly. And so that would be one trend I would forecast happening.
Are you seeing more and more customers focus on ESG during their audits and as they evaluate partners?
Absolutely. ESG is for many, for the majority of European customers, at least today, basic ESG adherence is a necessity, without which they do not move forward. Even if you are 3 times less the cost as compared to any other global player, they will not move forward unless you have ESG adherence at a basic level. And more and more companies today are asking for it. Rather, more and more companies as necessitating that as a prerequisite to do business with you. And so this is happening already, and it's going to intensify only in the years to come.
Got it. Manish?
So I'm going to answer the question 2 parts. One is something which is very topical to us. One statement one of our very senior clients had made is that, in life science, in pharma companies, we don't sell a product, we sell content. Right? You don't go to a doctor or a regulator, whoever it is, right? And saying, listen, see this beautiful pill, why don't you get your patients to pop it, right? You go with loads and loads of content, and based on that, you make your claim. And one of the things which we've been across building technologies, building processes, right? That content and data at one level, you could think about it interchangeably, right? The content is generated out of the data you create in clinical trials, other data which has come in. And that pretty much cuts across the entire chain, right? From R&D to actually even before that, discovery to R&D. And you could use that content in a very strategic way across the board, right? As long as pharma companies can get across the silos. Now, these silos were created because of regulation, right? So it's not, there is a reason for those silos. But I believe pharma life science companies in the future would become much more impactful, right? If some of these, you could deal between this issue of breaking the silos as well as being compliant, right? From a regulatory perspective. That's one piece. The other part, when we, at least we started off our journey as Indegene more than 2 decades back now, right? There were 2 broad themes which we used to hear, right? And I joke about this more. The 2 themes were that, you have wellness, going to prescription drugs, then hospitalization, that is chain. How do you shift it towards obviously the wellness piece? Siddharth alluded to that at some point in time, back, right? That theme goes on. I think the shift has been excruciatingly slow, right? People still talk about that. Probably it's going to continue moving in that direction. But the other theme which I used to hear about a couple more than 2 decades back, right? And I think that's where we are much closer to, right? Is the whole theme on personalization. Right? Earlier, when you would have this nuclear bomb through which you try to kill some small organism, protein, micro, whatever it is, right? Now, with the advent of gene therapy, cell therapy, and all these technologies, right? You're truly getting to personalization in a great way. Now, that obviously is great from a therapeutic perspective, but at scale, and when you have plethora of these options, that's going to fundamentally redefine how you approach the physician, how do you approach the patient, pharmacies, right? Because the whole thing is so different. And I guess that's where where science, technology, all this will converge and have a very different effect for the life science industry. Actually, biology and AI coming together, in my mind at least, that's going to be the completely life 3.0. Forget pharma 3.0.
Got it. Siddharth?
Look, my view is that, again, from a healthcare last mile delivery perspective, I think one of the biggest things that is going to hopefully happen, and again, speaking much more again from an Indian context, is the ability to provide personalized care bases your longitudinal healthcare data, right? So I'm sure that bases your pattern of living, your nutrition, your vitals and statistics, I think there is going to be significantly more personalized delivery of healthcare which will happen. And this may range from everything from the kind of test that you prescribe to the medicines that you take to the insurance cover that you get, to the kind of facilities that you access, to your cost. I think all of these things will come in, right? We are seeing today in very simplistic terms, scenarios, where insurers are now coming out saying, if you walk 10,000 steps a day, we'll reduce your premium by X or Y and Z. But I think a lot of this is going to be about personalized delivery of healthcare, where your long-term data on your personalized health, financial services along with it, and last mile delivery will all converge into a single product or an ecosystem, right? And I think that is the future, in my opinion.
Got it. Thank you. No, look, I think we have about 4 minutes, so and there are a few questions from the audience, so perhaps we can get through a couple of them. The first one, probably for Manish, can you talk a little bit more about what the digital strategy is to reach doctors that pharma companies employ?
So there are multiple digital strategies which pharma companies employ. First of all, you are at a very basic level, you are even trying to figure out the digital profile of physicians themselves, right? Or digital affinity of physicians, right? Which are the channels they go to, why they go to, and that we are trying, industry is trying to personalize as much as possible. From a pure, and that's more of a data level to get understand physicians better and have personalized strategies for them at one level, right? And reduce the segments to a very, very small segments, the end goal being n is equal to 1, right? Over here. Now, beyond that, as from a channel perspective, there are multiple channels. You obviously have the aggregator sites like WebMD, right? Or a bunch of places where physicians would go for their regular knowledge. You have emails, you have banners, right? You have more media buying, digital media buying for these companies. You have virtual sales reps, you have virtual MSLs, which are deployed to reach out to physicians and answer their queries. More and more now, there is deployment on EMRs, right? You straight away trying to figure out in the way to embed yourselves in the EMR process itself. In places like China, WhatsApp is very, very popular. You need to have a WhatsApp WeChat based strategy, right? So there are plethora of those type of digital channels which are being used by life science companies across the board.
I think we're out of time, so we might have to conclude. But my summary is we have conceptualized a new pharma company in 40 minutes. You can do it the hard way and do all of this on your own, which will take at least a few years. Or if you can afford it, and I think it will be hard. And if you have a pot of money, you can hire Alex as your head of R&D, Manish as your head of sales and marketing, Aman as your head of manufacturing, and Siddharth as your head of supply chain, and drive the company. And I think that might be the easier way to do it. But thank you all for a very engaging conversation. All of you have left us with a lot of ideas and thoughts to ponder, but really insightful. And thank you for sparing your valuable time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prem. A pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.